she kind of said, look, Joe, you're in between a rock and a hard place, and realistically, you're probably going to die either way, but the chemo is your only chance that you might live, but if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. And I don't know why, because I've never been a comedian, but I looked at her and I said, I'm really skinny right now. I reckon I can squeeze my way out of that rock and the hard place.
Hey, I'm Ange.
And I'm Beck.
And we are the Gold Diggers, because we believe there's gold found in everyone.
Everyone is unique, interesting and exciting with a great story to share.
And we aim to find it.
The question is, can we rise to the challenge and strike gold?
Honey, you're my sugar.
What an inspiring guest we had today. Joe Surace has survived cancer and was meant to have died within 3 days and is still alive today, isn't he?
I know, it's amazing. This story really is about keeping a positive mental attitude when something in life derails you and totally takes you off track. So it's a story of hope, and it'll be an encouragement to all of you, so stay tuned.
Honey, you're my sugar.
So this is how it works. One of us knows who the mystery guest is and the other one doesn't. And today it's Ange's turn to find the gold in our mystery guest, Joe Surace.
Wow, I'm looking forward to getting to know this guest. Tell me a little bit about him.
Well, I've got 3 points for you, Ange. And the first one is Joe is a world traveller.
Yeah.
He's also a cancer survivor.
Wow.
And he's a photographer.
Oh, this will be interesting.
No,
I like the world traveller part, especially.
Yes.
It'll be interesting to see some of the unique places he's been to in the world. And it sounds like he's got quite a story. So
yes, I think we should welcome him in.
So come on in, Joe. Welcome.
Woo!
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. It sounds like you have quite an interesting story. It sounds like it's full of adventure and lots of creativity, but some challenge and struggle and trials in there as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Beck's obviously told me you're a world traveller. So let's go there first. Let's do the fun stuff first.
Yeah, cool. Love it. Yeah.
Tell me, what is world travel look like for you?
Yeah. In particular, my wife and I love to cruise. So that's our thing. We'll fly anywhere in the world and jump on a cruise ship. So as of last week, we just did a little one last week, and we're up to cruise number 39.
Wow.
I've got a goal in the world to, in my lifetime, to hit at least 100. So a few years to go yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're sort of essentially head off somewhere overseas and then do a cruise from there.
So what's your favourite cruise you've been on?
Oh, favourite one.
Probably difficult to pick.
Lots of really good ones. We did one last year that was a real highlight. It was a bucket list one. We flew to Abu Dhabi of all places, and then jumped on a brand new ship, mega gigantic ship, and then sailed through the Suez Canal up to Italy, which was really cool. It was the biggest ship ever to go through the Suez Canal.
Yeah,
and we were on there, which was really awesome.
Amazing. You must have quite a cast iron stomach then to be at sea for so long.
Well, we go on really big ships, so they don't move on the water. It's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
You must meet a lot of people on these ships. And having done, because you said 49 cruises?
39.
39.
Almost 40, yeah.
That's a lot of cruises and a lot of people to meet along the way. Do you ever double up on seeing the same people on the cruises?
Occasionally, we've planned to meet certain people on those cruises.
Yeah.
Sometimes we bump into them.
Yeah.
But more often than not, we've made good friends, and then we catch up maybe if we're in their country. We say, hey, look, we're going to be there next month. Are you going to be around?
Amazing.
Let's catch up for dinner. So that's been cool.
Makes the world closer, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
So have you worked with any particular cruise lining company in particular?
I haven't worked for them, no, purely as a guest.
Well, I just mean, because if your aim is to have 100 in your lifetime,
yep.
Is this some kind of goal that's known to them? And
they should sponsor you.
Yeah, that's what
I
I'm
know,
like.
right?
Is there a
That'd be nice,
sponsorship
wouldn't
thing? Particularly because I understand you're a cancer survivor.
Yep.
So this sounds like, this is a challenge for you to achieve in your lifetime. And
sounds like an opportunity,
it sounds
doesn't
like
it?
This could be make a great story and a great sponsorship for some cruise liners.
Look, I do we mentioned photography before. I do take a lot of photos while I'm away, which I try and sell as artworks later, so that's a little thing out of it. Some of the cruise lines that we do travel a lot with, certainly throw a lot of perks our way. So once you started to do a few cruises, and we're up to 39 kind of thing, you do get a lot more things like, please come cruise with us. You know, here's some extra spending money, or a
Here's
better
a room with a
or-
balcony.
Yeah, balcony's a minimum we go with these days.
Yeah,
We don't do
definitely.
insides anymore. That's long gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. So, like, what parts of the world have you been to?
Well, cruising's taken us to the bottom part sort of South America, like Argentina, all the way up to Brazil. We did Carnival cruise many years ago. That was amazing. We've cruised Alaska. We've done several in the Mediterranean. We've done a transatlantic, so from Miami across to Southampton, the Suez Canal in the Middle East, Asia. We've done most of the oceans, which has been really cool.
What's on the bucket list?
There's still lots to do. We'd love to do one that goes right up to the very top of Norway, up to the northernmost point of Europe. There's only certain cruises that do those certain times of the year because of the weather, so we'll do one of those one day. Something near Antarctica would be really cool as well.
Yeah, go and see the penguins.
Yeah,
that would be amazing,
Yeah, I've
particularly
known
for a
people that have done that
photographer.
recently. Yeah.
So, are you like wildlife photography, landscape?
No, more landscape.
Yeah.
Landscape, yeah.
So, like, talk to me about your photography. How did you get into that? Is that
Yeah,
your
cool.
career?
It has been my career ever since I was 18, although it's a very part-time business these days. So when I was 18, I wanted to go and do something after high school, but I didn't want to go to uni full-time. I saw this introductory photography course at this great photo college back in Melbourne where I lived, and you could do a 10-week course and see if you like it. I absolutely loved it, so I ended up studying 4 years, got my diploma at the time, which was the highest level you could back then in photography. And I just loved it. And at the age of 22, I started my own photography business, set up a studio in Bridge Road in Melbourne. I was there for 7 years, and I was 22, young and naive, and I wanted to go out and be this big commercial fashion photographer. And I did do a lot of that stuff, but I really fell into weddings because a lot of the models I was photographing were like, Joe, can you photograph my wedding next year? And I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. You know, the money will be good. And then before I knew it, I was photographing 50 weddings a year or more, and did that
Wow.
for several years, and then moved my business up here when I met my wife 20 odd years ago, and continued to do all sorts of photography work. And then my photography work took a dramatic turn when I got cancer 10 years ago. So more landscapes and little jobs these days.
Okay. It does seem to happen to a lot of photographers, don't they? They always seem to end up getting into the wedding or events industry.
The money was just too good to say no.
Yeah.
They're
But
huge days too, aren't they?
Yeah, that very big day.
What would have
Yes.
been what would be your dream thing to photograph?
I think some of the things that I actually did achieve, I guess, was photographing models in a remote location where you've got a crew around you, like makeup artists and fashion designers, or I did a lot of that sort of stuff, and it was always great fun. The creativity bouncing off all those different people in the one day. You'd get home exhausted from it, but everyone's input just created such a great photo. So I really love those
And
days.
the pressure's really on you, though, isn't it? Because you've got all
Absolutely.
that whole team together, and
Yeah.
like you have to get the money shot.
You do.
And the
you
weather's
do.
going to be good.
Yeah.
And sometimes the weather doesn't play, and usually in a fashion shoot you can just go, you know what, we'll do it tomorrow or next week. But
Yeah.
with weddings you didn't have that
No.
second
That's
chance. You had
true.
to soldier on. Didn't matter if you were sick or the weather, you just keep going.
Yeah. Now I've just come back from being on safari, and
Oh,
you
wow.
know, I've got a nice camera. Have
Yep.
no idea how to use it, but got some lucky shots of
Oh, well
some
done.
nice,
Go you.
some nice animals. And there was this one moment that a leopard was looking down at me, and I
Yep.
was pretty close to this leopard, and I was looking at it through the lens of my camera,
What a feeling.
and it almost felt like a magical moment. And I've
I
never
bet.
had that behind a camera before, where the leopard was looking right down the lens at me, and I looking at it.
That's so cool, isn't
And
it?
I was just like, I could not take enough shots of this.
Yep.
This moment. Do you have those moments where you just
Yeah,
know
you
something
do.
magical is happening
You
here
do.
right now?
Sometimes, in particular when you're photographing people and you really connect it. So through weddings and fashion. I've photographed thousands of people in my lifetime. And sometimes, yeah, you just do click through the eye and the lens and you're just like, I know this is going to be a great shot. And then you see it on the computer later and you're like, wow, it's even better than I was expecting. And so that is a great feeling.
That must be real satisfying.
Absolutely.
Feeling. Yeah.
Especially if you put a lot of work and time into making that shot happen and then you get it. It's really good.
Yeah.
Great feeling.
And were you in danger at that moment?
Actually, you know what? Like, we were in the middle of a pride of lions eating on a zebra.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Like, there was probably 6 lions all together chewing on a zebra, which I know that probably sounds quite gruesome for some, but this is nature. This is the wild.
And I guess he wasn't hungry when he looked at you because he's already eaten the zebra. So.
But the rangers were all saying, actually, they're not bothered with humans at all. We don't taste good.
Did you have a little
thing.
sign on your camera that said objects may appear closer?
But we were able to get really close. And no, I didn't. I just was taken in awe, really, of the beauty of nature. And the leopard, I think, had just eaten something, and it was still, the remains of it was still in another tree somewhere. So I felt pretty safe. Felt pretty safe. But there are some lengths photographers have to go to, isn't there? Like they have to sit for hours, or they've just got to get the right
especially
shot.
if you're doing that wildlife stuff.
Oh,
it's, you know, and I remember last year, actually, I was doing a massive photo project for our school hospital here on the sunny coast, and we needed to create a whole lot of landscapes to put in their cancer centre, and they all had to be within like a 20-minute radius of the hospital. And so there were certain locations that I went back to again and again and again, just waiting for the right weather, the right light. And I remember there was one particular place I really wanted to get a photo, and we just had about a month of rain and wind, and eventually I got the shot. But yeah, you've got to have that patience in you, or it just doesn't work.
Yeah. So you said your photography changed when you 10 years ago when you got diagnosed with cancer. Can you talk us through a bit about that journey?
Yeah, for sure. So the year leading up to getting cancer, I actually decided to slow down my weddings a little bit, partly because I was doing some other work as well and we wanted to travel more. So I stopped booking weddings in for every weekend into my calendar and like, no, I'm going away in November or whatever. So I was still doing weddings and other work. Then when I got cancer, cancer left me so disabled for a very long time. For 3 years of my life, actually, I couldn't walk properly or let alone hold a camera. I couldn't really work in the business at all for 5 years. So when I started doing photography again 5 years later, I was like, you know what, my wedding days are behind me. I don't need that pressure. I can't carry equipment for an 18-hour day anymore. So I started just focusing more again on landscapes, on my cruises, etc. And I still do a bit of the fashion stuff and what have you, but very, very different to the massive jobs I used to take on years ago.
So you had a 3-year period there where you were fighting and you were battling cancer.
Yeah, so I actually, interestingly enough, 10 years ago this week was when I actually turned really, really sick. I had been sick for a little bit, and it was May 2014 that I got diagnosed with cancer. So treatment lasted about a year between chemo and surgery, but I spent many months in hospital. I walked out weighing 40 kilos, so you can imagine how light someone 40 kilos is, bound to wheelchairs, and I couldn't walk. So it took me about the first year post-treatment, I was very much in wheelchairs, mobility scooters, walking sticks, couldn't drive, all that sort of thing.
Was the cancer itself impacting your mobility, or was it the treatment?
All of it. Even I was actually in hospital for 133 days in a row while I was having cancer. So it's roughly 4.5 months if you do the maths. Being in hospital for that long just deconditioned my body so much on top of all the cancer and treatment. So it's what left me extremely disabled at the time. And then over the next few weeks and months and years, I got stronger and stronger. But for 3 years, I needed a walking stick. So even as a photographer, it was very hard to hold a camera while trying to balance on a walking stick kind of thing. So
you've obviously rehabilitated since then. Was that a process that you had to go through?
Yeah, that was really, really hard physically and mentally. For 3 years there, it was trying to get myself back to a position of being able to work again. So I worked very, very closely. My medical team alone was sensational, but I worked very closely with a cancer charity where I now work at, actually, funnily enough. They sort of had a lot of allied health programs as well. So I would go there to get specialist oncology massage or see an exercise physiologist. And then out of that, I also worked with private exercise physiologists as well, initially to get my legs back up so I could stand on my feet, and later to try and get my arms a bit better and whatever. But it was very, very hard. I remember in those first years, I used to drive my mobility scooter around. I called her Madge. So Madge and I would go out every day because I couldn't drive. So her and I would drive down to the beach, and there was a set of stairs going down to the beach access. So I would park the Madge there and practice walking up and down. And that was even not just for my legs, but to get my lungs breathing better, because the chemo destroyed a lot of my left lung in particular. So that was a lot of the rehab I used to do daily, which was really hard at the time. But I'm glad I've come out the other side. Very grateful for that.
And what was happening? Have you got family? Have you got kids?
We don't have kids. Interestingly enough, I have a wife. My wife Caroline, who's amazing. We started traveling so much and careers and all that before I got sick. They're like, we'll just put kids off for another year or two. And then cancer came along, and I was absolutely not having kids post that, and possibly even maybe wasn't able to have kids those last couple of years leading into the diagnosis. We'll never know. So we kind of gone, hey, look, we can't have kids, but we'll get on with life. And now we travel more, I guess. But my wife Caroline was absolutely amazing through all of that period, and still today. And even my parents and family who live in Melbourne would fly up quite often to check in on me and spend time with me and all that sort of stuff too, which is great.
And I know a lot of people struggle kind of with their mental health during the cancer journey.
Yeah.
Like, how was it? Was the diagnosis, did it come completely out of the blue?
It
Shock
did.
to you? How did you handle that?
Mental health, it's absolutely huge. It's words we hear a lot today, and it's something that I actually really preach in survivorship of cancer. So at the time that I was diagnosed, I'd spent 6 months going to and from the doctor with a whole lot of back pain, and they couldn't work out what was wrong with me. So many different tests, including tests for cancer, that came up negative. And eventually an MRI picked up that I had some sort of cancer in my lymph nodes. So that was a massive shock. You hear that word, you've got cancer. I can absolutely assure you they're the worst words you'll ever hear in your life. So I did go into a massive anxiety attack at the time and what have you. I was so very sick at that point, though, that we didn't even know the extent of the cancer, that probably about 10 days later I got taken to Nambour Hospital by ambulance. And then before I knew, I was being poked and prodded and kept alive, essentially. Coming out of that, my mental health was literally jumping on that scooter and going out every day and seeing the beach waves or whatever. And eventually my amazing oncologist, when it came time to go to work 3 years later, he was like, look, I'm not going to sign off you being at work unless you see our oncology psychologist here at the hospital, just to sort of keep an eye on, work things and what have you. And that was great. And he really encouraged me to sort of talk about sort of all the issues I've been through and really sort of process it and think about it and how I can help other people in the process. And that's been amazing for my mental health. So
it sounds like a very sudden onset of it, or the reality of it for you. That would have been a shock for your wife too. How did she cope with those days?
Yeah, she was a real trooper at the time. We were all shocked because we weren't expecting a cancer diagnosis. We just thought I'd sore back from working too hard for many years. But
I often hear it starts with a sore back. Just people I've spoken to, they said it began with a sore back. Really pays to get that checked out, doesn't it?
It does, and that's what I was doing. I was at the doctor's every 2 weeks, and I don't blame them. They were looking for things, but some cancers are very rare and really hard to spot.
Hard to find, yeah. And so your wife was, you're telling me how she...
Yeah. She was great, and she was working 2 jobs at a time, 2 part-time jobs, but many hours every week between the two, and we weren't in a financial position for her to leave either at the time, so she was coming to see me at hospital twice a day while still trying to work. And when I say she was amazing, she really was, because I hated the hospital food for the days that I could eat. So she would even bring me dinner every night as well, rather than the hospital food. So she was tremendous throughout all of that.
It's amazing to have that kind of support, and you really need that when you're going through something like that, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
I never quite know if it's worse for the patient or the carer of the patient. And I think sometimes watching someone you love be so sick and feel so helpless is it's equally as
hard.
difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, and I could see how hard it was on her. And I think what helped her at the time as well was that my medical team, and I say team because there's so many people working on me to keep me alive, they were as good with her as they were with me.
That's great.
So they gave her a lot of time, and a lot of time I was lying in bed just drugged out, not knowing what was going on. So they were talking with her more, but they really made sure she was okay and she was eating or going home to get some sleep or keeping her informed of everything. So they were a big support vehicle for her at the time.
And did they give you a positive prognosis, or was it looking very bleak?
At the time?
Yeah.
No. So that day I ended up in hospital by ambulance. I'll never forget, it was May the 31st in 2014. And the 24 hours leading into that, I had really bad hiccups that just would not go away. And we tried every wives' tale to get rid of them, and nothing was working. We even rang up some of the medical lines and saying, try this, try that. If you're not better in 6 hours, go to hospital. So early that morning, my wife had to go to work, but I suddenly took a little bit of a worse turn at home, and my mum was there. And I said, look, can you please call an ambulance? Maybe they can give me a shot or something, let me get a few hours sleep. And the ambulance came and said, look, we're just going to take you to hospital. I said, okay. And on the way to hospital, they discovered that all of my signs in my body, like heart rate, etc., were just through the roof, going crazy. Got to hospital that day at emergency, and they said, look, we're just going to keep you in all day today because, like, we don't know what's going on with you. We know you've had some sort of cancer diagnosis, but we don't know the length of that yet. So they then actually kept me in for 5 days, around about 5 days. Over those 5 days, they did every test you could think of on me, including biopsies and whatever. And so this really interesting major part of the story. So on about that 5th or 6th day, a whole team of doctors, etc., came into my room, about the size of sort of where we are right now. And my parents, my wife, they were all around the bed. And they said, look, we've worked out what's wrong with you and whether there's a chance we can keep you alive or not. And essentially what I had was started as testicular cancer, which then spread into my lymph nodes and then spread into my liver as well. So I kind of had 3 cancers going on all at the same time, except that the testicular one had burnt out, or what they call it, sort of wasn't causing me any damage at the time, but it had. But the liver in particular was crazy. So they said that I could do nothing and they would take me off to palliative care and I could die peacefully probably within 3 days to 10 days later or so.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Yeah. So imagine hearing that while your wife and your
No,
parents
wow.
are all in the room.
Yeah.
Or we could try a really aggressive form of chemo, but it might be my only saviour for life. Essentially, I needed surgery, but my body was too sick. I'd just die in the surgery. So they said if I want to go ahead with the chemo, they would actually put me in ICU and do the first round of chemo in ICU. So I've got the absolute best care I could possibly have. And there's probably a 30% chance I might survive, but it was really important I survived the first 3 days of chemo. If I didn't survive that, it would be, let's just take Joe off and he can die kind of thing. So I remember one of the female doctors in this team, she was squeezing my hand, my left hand, while she's telling me all this. She was doing most of the talking, and she was actually crying. I'm like, geez, it's pretty bad because the doctor's crying at me that I've only just met a couple of days ago. And she kind of said, look, Joe, you're in between a rock and a hard place. And, realistically, you're probably going to die either way. But the chemo is your only chance that you might live. But if you don't want to do it, you don't have to. And I don't know why, because I've never been a comedian. But I looked at her and I said, I'm really skinny right now. I reckon I can squeeze my way out of that rock and the hard place. and everyone in the room laughed. And the head oncologist, he's like, I think this guy might just do it. So about 2 to 3 days later, they commenced chemo, even over the weekend, which never, ever happens. That's how rare my case was, in ICU. And it was touch and go there. But about 2 weeks later, or 10 to 14 days later, I came out of ICU and went up into my own ward room. So I had survived that first round of chemo.
So, when you said that, after you made that joke, the doctor said, I think you might just make it.
Yeah.
Do you think that was like a test of your attitude?
I think it was all of our attitudes at the time because as I learnt throughout this whole process that these doctors, they're just trying their best half the time too, and what might work for that person doesn't work for that person, and there's always new research, etc., coming out. So there was a lot of guesswork on their part as mine as well. And I think together as a team, myself doing my bit and them doing, their huge bit,
Yeah.
we got to the other side.
You often hear, though, that people that are going through cancer, if you approach it with a positive mental attitude, which must be
Yep.
extremely difficult
I know
given
that
the
now.
circumstances,
Yeah.
actually tend to fare a bit better.
Yep.
So I
For
don't know
sure.
whether that's been the case with you.
Yeah.
But
I think I was 40 and I was just like, how the hell did I end up here? I was fit as a fiddle like 6 months ago and, I'm only 40. Like I've got so much in my life, so many cruises to do yet. All this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like how did I end up here? And I just really didn't want to die.
so you decided to go for the treatment,
Yep.
and that was pretty rough, was it? Like,
It was extremely rough. And to give you an idea of how rough it was, the very first day that they rolled me into ICU to commence it, I remember there was my medical team, and mind you, I'm lying flat on my back, so I can't always see them, but I can certainly hear them. Emergency doctors, ICU doctors, all screaming at each other and F words going everywhere, because some just didn't want to do that to me. They just literally thought, we're killing this guy, just let him go off and die peacefully in palliative care. But my oncologist and the others were like, no, Joe's agreed to this, we're going to give it a go, we're going to do it. And I remember just before they started it, I remember a female doctor coming up near me saying, Joe, don't do this. Just, you're going to die. Like, it's going to be a rough way to die. Just, you don't have to go ahead. And I was like, no, let's just do it. And I don't blame her. Her experience said I was going to die that day. Luckily, I didn't. And I'm still here to tell this story.
10 years later. Amazing.
Yeah. But the next few months weren't easy.
well, that's an amazing moment
Sorry.
because everyone, even some medical people, are telling you that this is
Yep.
the treatment itself is going to kill you.
Yeah.
Better to just die and prepare and do it
Yep.
gracefully.
Yeah.
What was within you to make you think, no, this is the right decision?
Well, doing nothing meant an absolute death. Like they said, absolutely, the longest we could probably keep you alive for is 3 weeks, but most likely you'll die in the next few days. So my only chance of survival was to give it a go. As far as I'm concerned, I had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was what made me say yeah.
And your wife was with you? Was it?
No, she wasn't allowed to be in ICU. So they were allowed to come in for a few minutes at a time to see me kind of thing. But she
But
wasn't
she was
around
in
when it
support of
started.
the decision, was she?
Yes, look, everyone was because it was like, let's give it a go. Like if
Yeah.
you're going to die, just,
Die trying.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so what did the treatment look like then? How bad was that on you?
So that was absolutely awful and I would never wish it on my worst enemy. So for those first few days, I had what they call a PICC line put into your sort of top of your neck and whatever. I remember that was a bit painful. And so I had all sorts of IV stuff going into me through there, which was mainly the chemo. I had sort of PICC lines and cannulas, etc., in arms as well. So I had all sorts of antibiotics and other drugs going into me to counteract the effects of something else. And then all the other sort of chemo sessions were all done up in my wardroom after the initial chemo stage. So they would come in and connect all the things up to my cannulas, etc. But I was confined to a bed. And as I said, it was 133 days of being in a hospital bed. So I was attached to so many cords. I was having initially 15-minute observations. So think of trying to sleep when you're being woken up every 15 minutes. They then moved to a half an hour or an hour. You can't just roll over, partly because my body was just too sick to roll me. So I'd have to wait on hospital staff to come and roll me every 2 hours. I couldn't get out of bed to go to the toilet. So you can imagine how awful and messy and horrible that situation was. Every 2 days, I would use a hoist crane to come and get me out of the bed into a wheelchair to wheel me off to have a shower. It was a really, really horrible
And
time.
this went on for how long?
4.5 months.
Wow.
So the worst of that was probably 4 months. The last 3 weeks was what we considered being the rehab part, where I didn't have as many cords attached and I was able to get out of my bed onto a wheelchair kind of thing myself. But for 4 months of that was my life.
So when you threw this 4 months, it was looking hopeful then that this was gone, and
It was looking hopeful, but there were certainly many times a panic button was hit. So, someone come along to do my obs and like, oh shit, Joe's oxygen levels way low, and they'd hit that button on the wall, and doctors would come running from everywhere. And I remember there was one time that at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd caught pneumonia, of all things, while I was going through this as well. And there was so much fluid in my lungs that I wasn't going to survive till lunchtime that day. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, they've rang my wife and said, you might want to come in and say goodbye to Joe, because we're about to rush him into emergency surgery. And so I had emergency lung surgery at about 5 in the morning, and I didn't notice, but you're awake while they do that to you.
Oh,
so,
nice.
yeah.
I've heard that about brain surgery. That you're actually awake.
Yeah.
Because they have to see the reaction of your eyes or something.
Yeah.
Everything you're going through is probably everybody's worst nightmare.
It is. It is. And I've lived it, you know, and then interestingly, that was the hardest part physically and mentally, but the really hard part mentally was the last 3 weeks of what was rehab, and you'd think that'd be the best part. But at the time, we got shipped off to Caloundra Hospital, which was a rehab unit for the Sunny Coast region, and as a rehab room, you're encouraged to get out of your bed and move and exercise or whatever. Mind you, I'm 40 kilos and I can't move, or very little anyway. So you don't even get a TV in the room. You've got to like get yourself out of bed into the wheelchair to go watch TV in a communal area. You're often not in your own room anymore. You're sharing with strangers. You're having breakfast, lunch and dinner with strangers at a communal table. And everyone in there is doing rehab for whatever reason. So you might be at a table having breakfast and the person next to you has been in a car crash and can't feed themselves, or the person on the other side of you's had his legs amputated. The person next to you maybe for whatever reason has turned into an absolute vegetable, and they've got 2 nurses helping them eat. And you're sitting there going,
How am I here?
How am I here?
Yeah.
Absolutely, how am I here? And I was absolutely dying to get home by that point, to the point where I was really annoying the hospital staff. They're going, can I go home? And they're like, you're not well enough yet, Joe, maybe next week. And after enough begging, they let me go home.
How was it when the moment they said, okay, you're cancer free? Like, what was the celebration like?
I kind of heard those words a little bit along the way, and I finally heard it for good in, I think it was around about late 2021, 2022. So all of my scans post-surgery as well showed no signs of new cancer. So all of those were great moments. But it was finally, I think it was about late 2021, during COVID, my oncologist said, Joe, I think you're good. I don't want to see you unless you're coming back to see me, to show me travel photos, is what he said. So that was a really, really great
Amazing.
moment. Yeah.
And will you have to keep having regular checks and things?
I'm lucky I'm at the point now I don't, but I did up until that point in sort of late 2021.
What do you think it was that got you through those really dark days?
A lot of things. One, my will to live. My beautiful family, wife, etc., and friends around me. I was too sick a lot of time in hospital to read my phone, but my wife would read out beautiful messages that friends and that had been sent in, which was really cool. And then another big thing that helped me a lot was when I was in my own hospital room for about 3 months of that long period, the medical team said to my wife, look, this is going to be Joe's room for a while. Put up lots of photos in here that really inspired Joe. So she actually went and printed off a lot of our travel photos. And that was really cool because I'd be lying there in bed and a nurse would come in to work on me and she'd be going, gee, Joe, I love your travel photos. Like, where was that one taken? And I'd probably be there half asleep going, oh, that was in Santorini or something. And then a conversation would start and suddenly it would perk me up a little bit and we'd start talking about travel for the next 10 minutes. Well, I'd probably swap in my cannula or something horrible at the time. But that was really good, a lot of those travel photos in the room.
It sounds like you really defied the odds. You know,
I
a lot of the nurses and that told
Yeah.
you not to do it. And
And I'm super grateful that I am here to tell this story. I know how lucky I got. Not everyone does. But yeah, I was also lucky that I just got such a great team that really believed in me and fought hard for me.
So I often hear stories when people are at the brink of death and they get given a second chance of life, that life looks very different on the other side of that. What's the differences?
Yeah, true. Life-changing, for sure. I certainly stopped to smell the roses a lot more. I'm really conscious to be grateful in everything every day. I remember reading in a book or something many years ago, prior to cancer, and I probably didn't appreciate it at the time, it was like, you should be grateful for 3 different things every day, even if they're just really little things. You know, like, I'm lucky to be able to afford clothes. So now I kind of really practice that every day. If I'm out walking the dog, I'm like, gee, it's a really beautiful day. You know, I'm really grateful for that sort of thing. So
What were the 3 things? Sorry.
it could be 3 different things every day.
Oh, just
So,
3. Yeah.
Just being aware of being grateful.
Yeah.
So that's sort of been a big life-changing thing. And getting back to the travel and excuse my language here, but when I ended up in hospital, we had a very big Alaskan trip that was cancelled worth many thousands, and a couple of other cruises as well. And then, so that all got cancelled. Naively, the year later, we tried to book it again using some of those credits, and my doctor's like, Joe, you're not ready to go to Alaska yet. We did get there in 2019, which was great. But as I started to sort of get into my rehab and getting better, I was like, you know what, cancer, f*** you, I'm going to travel even more. And I absolutely do that more, sort of. And it's just a long weekend away, whatever. That's what sort of really spurs me on and keeps me going.
Yeah, awesome. So you mentioned that you now work for a charity. So what is that you do?
Yeah. So I work for Bloom Hill Cancer Care. So they're a local Sunny Coast charity, been around for about 25 odd years. And so we offer a whole lot of allied health services there to help cancer clients. And they're the things that I took advantage of for about 2 to 3 years. And then around about 2021, they said they needed someone to help run events and all that sort of stuff for them. And having been involved in so many events as a photographer in my lifetime, it was something I knew a lot about. And so interestingly, that was the job they hired me for, and I still do that, but I probably spend the majority of my time around cancer lived experience and running lived experience sessions for different cancer clients and basically helping the cancer community.
Yeah.
You'd be such a source of hope for people as you're talking to them and telling them the extreme that you've come from and actually survived that.
Yeah, I do. And without sort of giving myself a big head, I couldn't tell you how many hundreds of times I've had people come up to me and say, Joe, you're an inspiration or something like that. But once again, being grateful again, I say, well, you know, hey, if I can help other people, why not? I've come out the other side. I know how lucky I am. So this is me giving back.
So, Joe, there's such a great wealth of experience you've had there and so much hope you can give to other people and obviously have been giving so much hope to people. So, Ange, do you reckon it's time to find some gold?
I'm ready. Let's do it. All I can say is wow. I mean, what an incredible story, Joe. And we often hear it in the podcasts where life just is going in one direction. You're focused on this is what the future looks like, and something out of the ordinary happens, something railroads it. And that certainly is the case in your story, and took you on a whole tangent in your life that you didn't know where that was going to lead. A lot of people, as we've talked about, mental health there is where you really struggle, you feel hopeless. But it didn't feel that was necessarily the case for you. Yes, you must have, you've obviously struggled with the diagnosis and that. But you always seem to have a source of hope. You always seem to believe that something better was going to be coming, that enabled you to take risks, that enabled you to stay strong and to keep a positive mindset. And I think there's some really big keys there for anybody that's going through a season like that, whether it's cancer or, whatever it is that's railroaded you from life, keeping that positive mindset. I love the fact that you've got goals in your life and you've still got goals and you've maintained those goals because that's really important. I think having something to aim for in life is something that really keeps us moving forward and keeps us seeing a future beyond the circumstance of right now. So you really are a great source of hope, as Becca said, to people. And I often find when people that go through a serious trial, it's in those times you actually find purpose. And that purpose is now being fulfilled in what you're doing with other cancer patients. And
very much so.
You're able to give to them something that probably those that haven't walked that journey aren't able to give. And that's a real gift that you're giving to them. And it's that word hope, that it doesn't matter. You were 3 days from death. And yet you're still here 10 years later. And that's a remarkable story. And it shows great strength for you, that you've got hope. You can see beyond your circumstance, you keep your goals, and you've had the great support of your wife and family around you. So we look forward to hearing more adventures that are to come.
For sure.
And absolutely hit those 100.
Yeah, I'm even going to go for
Yes.
200, I think.
We've got to go for it.
We want photos.
And
yeah.
we want a
Yeah.
sponsorship from
Yes.
a cruise
Sounds
company.
good. Let's organise it.
Because this is actually a
Yeah.
remarkable story of
Yeah.
defying the odds. And, you know, it's like Make-A-Wish is for that Make-A-Wish Foundation. It's for kids. Can't we have that for adults as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That'd be
Make
fun,
a
wouldn't it?
wish.
I
Yeah,
think so
love
too.
it.
Get 100
Let's do it.
cruises.
Yeah,
Let's go
you
for
could
it.
give motivational talks on the cruises.
Yeah, maybe.
There you
Maybe.
go.
There we
Opportunity
go.
everywhere.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being with us, for sharing your story. I know it's going to bring a lot of hope to so many of our listeners.
Yeah. Thank you. If I could probably just share one last little thing. You touched
Yeah.
on hope, and an interesting sort of little thing about my whole cancer journey that I didn't really ever know before I had cancer was that my blood type is B positive. And often they would have to give me many blood transfusions when I was in hospital. Excuse me. And they'd often be waiting for B positive blood to arrive from Brisbane. It wasn't always available on the sunny coast. So the nurses would say, Joe, just be positive while you're waiting for your B positive blood to arrive. So that's kind of become my little calling these days. I just say be positive. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really does make a big difference, doesn't it?
It does,
A
really
positive
does.
mental
yeah,
mindset.
hope and be positive for sure.
Yeah, wonderful.
Cool.
Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you.
that message with us.
Thank you so much.
So that's it for today's podcast. You'll find us on all the major podcast platforms. The podcasts come out every Wednesday. We'd love to hear from you on our socials, the Gold Diggers Podcast. Tell us about your story so we can find the gold in you.
Easy as pie, lemon, apple, or cherry. Loving you is so very sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be such a piece of cake? And your smile is the icing. Loving you is a poem. Honey, you're my sugar.